In 289 AC, the Ironborn dared to challenge the might of the Seven Kingdoms. Balon Greyjoy raised his Kraken banner, and the realm braced for war. Before dragons returned to the skies, the seas ran red with the blood of rebels. This is the untold story of the Greyjoy's last stand. In the year 289 after Aegon's conquest, the Seven Kingdoms had known peace for just 6 short years. But peace in Westeros is a fragile thing. And in the Iron Islands, peace was never the way of life. The Ironborn had always been a people apart, born of salt and storm, raised on the creed that what is not given must be taken. To them, the mainland was soft, rich with plunder, yet ruled by kings who knew nothing of the sea. And though Robert Baratheon's rebellion had brought a new king to the Iron Throne, the Ironborn had bent the knee only in form, never in spirit. At the heart of this brewing storm stood Balon Greyjoy, Lord of the Iron Islands. A proud, unyielding man, he looked upon the victories of Robert's rebellion not with loyalty, but with envy. While others gained lands, titles, and gold, the Ironborn gained only chains of obligation to a distant crown. And Balon had no taste for chains. Elsewhere in the realm, King Robert sat upon the Iron Throne. His reign began with the promise of unity, the great houses bound together by their shared victory over the Targaryens. But beneath the surface, fault lines were already forming. The Lannisters guarded their gold, the Tyrells tended their gardens, the Martells nursed old wounds, and the Starks kept to the cold north. Yet the Ironborn has ever looked outward, to the waves, to the horizon, to the next raid. Balon Greyjoy's vision was not merely one of rebellion, but of resurrection. He sought to restore the old way, the ancient creed of reaving and raiding, when the Ironborn took what they desired from the soft lands. No more ties to the Iron Throne. No more bending the knee to a king of the mainland. His ancestors had been kings of salt and rock. And in his mind, so too would he. In secret, the forges burned hotter. Shipwrights bent their backs to the timber. And all the while, the Ironborn captains whispered of conquest, of the wealth that lay unguarded in the Reach, the Westerlands, and even the North. Balon's plan was bold, but it was born of hubris. In the year 289 AC, Balon struck. His long ships slipped silently from their harbors in the dead of night. They sailed under cover of storm and darkness, striking first at Lannisport, the jewel of the Westerlands. The Lannister fleet, proud and gleaming, was caught at anchor and burned to the waterline before a single alarm bell could ring. Smoke choked the harbor, and the proud ships of the Lions sank one by one into the black. It was the first blow in what would become known as the Greyjoy Rebellion, a brief but brutal war that would draw the full might of the Seven Kingdoms upon the Iron Islands. For in striking at the Lannisters, Balon had not merely declared war. He had challenged the power of King Robert Baratheon himself. From the Red Keep, ravens flew in all directions. Robert called upon his bannermen, and they answered. Lords from every corner of Westeros prepared their men. Stannis Baratheon, master of ships, took command of the royal fleet. Eddard Stark, warden of the North, began his march south and west. The Reach readied its ships, and the Vale sent knights. The Ironborn had woken a sleeping giant. What followed would be a test not only of steel, but of strategy, a clash of naval cunning and unyielding stone. At the heart of it all lay Pyke, the seat of House Greyjoy, perched upon jagged stacks of rock, its bridges swaying above the surf. To reach it was to brave the teeth of the sea. To take it was another matter entirely. But before the siege could begin, the Crown's forces would have to sweep the Ironborn from the seas, reclaim the stolen coast, and shatter the myth of their invincibility. This is the story of that war, the politics that sparked it, the battles that shaped it, and the fall of a king who ruled the waves, but could not master the land. This is the Greyjoy's Rebellion, and it begins with the old way. 2 princes drowned in their own blood, a fleet turned to ashes in a single night, and a king who ruled the sea brought to his knees. This is not a tale of thrones won and lost. This is the war the mainland tried to forget, the war where the Ironborn rose. and the realm answered with fire and steel. In the year 289 after Aegon's conquest, the Seven Kingdoms had known peace for only 6 years. Yet peace in Westeros is like a glass ship in a storm, beautiful, fragile, and always one wave away from shattering. Robert Baratheon, the warrior who had claimed the Iron Throne in rebellion, sat in the Red Keep. His bannermen had returned to their keeps. The realm's wounds were not healed, merely hidden beneath the gilded bandages of victory. Far to the west, scattered like stones cast into the sunset sea, lay the Iron Islands. 7 main isles of bleak cliffs and wind-lashed shores, home to a people shaped by the sea's cruelty. They are called the Ironborn, Reavers, Sailors, Warriors. They follow the old way, the creed of taking what you can, holding what you can, and paying the iron price for every possession. To them, peace is stagnation. To them, war is the water in their veins. In Pyke, the seat of House Greyjoy, Balon Greyjoy brooded over the state of his people. He had bent the knee to Robert Baratheon at the end of Robert's rebellion, but he had been in the body only, never in spirit. The Ironborn had gained nothing from Robert's rise. No lands, no privileges, no ships. They remained bound to a throne they had not chosen. And Balon, son of Balon Greyjoy, saw this not as peace, but as insult. Balon's father, Lord Quellan, had sought to modernize the Ironborn, building better relations with the mainland, ending some of the old reaving customs, even sending his sons to be fostered in the south. But Balon despised such softness. When Quellan died in battle during the Greyjoy fleet's fight against the Red Wine fleet in the Reach, Balon inherited the lordship, and with it, the power to shape the Iron Islands in his image. And Balon's image was one of krakens with claws spread wide over the seas. Balon Greyjoy was not a man who waited for fortune to smile. He was the storm, and storms do not ask permission before they break. In the long halls of Pyke, under the flicker of torchlight, Balon began to speak once more of the old way. To his captains, his bannermen, his priests of the drowned god, he whispered of freedom from the mainland yoke, and of crowns once worn by his ancestors before the dragons came. A crown of driftwood and salt. Centuries before, the Ironborn had been kings in truth. The islands had united under the Whores, who ruled not just the Isles, but much of the Riverlands besides. That dynasty had been shattered when Aegon the Conqueror brought his dragons west, burning Harrenhal and boiling King Harrenhal in his own tower. Since then, the Ironborn had lived under rulers they had not chosen, Targaryens first, and now Robert Baratheon. But to Balon, the blood of kings was still in his veins, and it demanded more than submission. His plan took shape in the shipyards and the longship decks. Every harbor was put to work. Great Wick, Harlaw, Black Tide, Saltcliffe. Axes were sharpened, sails repaired, hulls tarred. The Ironborn fleet was not vast compared to the great navies of the Reach or the Royal Fleet at King's Landing, but it was fast, agile, and crewed by men born to the sea. In this, Balon saw his advantage. He would strike before the realm could unite against him. The first blow fell at Lannisport. Under cover of darkness, Balon's longships slipped into the harbor, their oars muffled, their sails furled. The Lannister fleet, pride of the Westerlands, guardians of the Gold Road, lay at anchor, their crews asleep in the city. The Ironborn came without warning. Torches became firebrands, hulls became funeral pyres. By dawn, the harbor was a blackened graveyard of ships. Lannisport's fleet, meant to defend the coast, was gone, and the lines of Casterly Rock roared in outrage. Balon's captains spread like oil on water. They raided the coast of the Reach, striking fishing villages and lightly guarded ports. They swept into the Shield Islands, daring to plant their Kraken banners in sight of Old Town's great beacon. They even tested the defenses of the north, probing Deepwood Mott's supply lines. It was war in all but name, and soon the name would follow. Word of the raids reached King's Landing swiftly. King Robert Baratheon, never one to ignore a challenge, called his banners. The summons went far and wide, to the Reach, to the Vale, to the Stormlands, to the north. From Storm's End came Lord Stannis Baratheon, master of ships, stern and relentless. From Winterfell came Lord Eddard Stark, Warden of the North, the quiet honor to Robert's roaring fury. From Casterly Rock came Lord Tywin Lannister, cold as gold and twice as hard. The Ironborn had stung the realm. Now the realm would close its fist. Stannis would take the sea. The royal fleet, bolstered by ships from the Vale and the Reach, would sweep west, hunting the raiders and breaking the Ironborn's hold on the coast. Eddard Stark would lead the land assault, landing forces on Great Wick to strike at the heart of the Isles. And when the island defenses were broken, the noose would tighten around Pyke itself, the ancient fortress that had never fallen to an enemy in living memory. The war moved swiftly. Stannis' fleet hunted down Balon's longships one by one, using heavier war galleys to smash through the lighter longships' formations. Though the Ironborn captains were fierce, they could not stand an open battle against such numbers. They fought like wolves, striking fast, retreating faster, but Stannis was a hound on their trail, driving them back toward the Isles. At last the storm broke over Pyke. Perched upon great stacks of rock, its towers connected by swaying rope, and stone bridges, the fortress seemed to grow out of the sea itself. Its walls were slick with spray, its gates narrow and treacherous. To take it, attackers would need not just courage, but the favor of the sea. And the sea does not favor the landbound. The Ironborn had retreated to their fortress, but they were not beaten yet. Pyke was built for war, not for the kind fought on green fields, but the kind waged by wind and tide. Its towers rose from separate islets, each one a citadel in its own right, bound by bridges that swayed over churning waters. Any attacker would have to fight not only the defenders, but the elements themselves. Stannis Baratheon's ships anchored beyond the reach of the castle's scorpions and trebuchets. Siege engines were assembled on the decks. Ballistae were loaded with fire pots. The plan was simple: batter the outer towers with relentless bombardment, while Eddard Stark's forces landed on the outer rocks to cut off escape. But the sea rarely respects plans. The assault began at dawn. War galleys edged forward, hurling fire and stone against the sea tower and the Great Keep. The Ironborn answered with their own engines, their projectiles crashing down on the decks below. One royal galley took a hit amidships and sank within sight of the walls, dragging men into the freezing surf. Still, the attackers pressed on. On the landward side, Eddard Stark's men advanced over jagged rocks and narrow spits of land. Each bridge had to be taken by force, each gate battered down under withering arrow fire. The Ironborn fought like cornered wolves, and in truth, they were. They knew there was no retreat, no surrender that would restore their pride. The bridges ran slick with blood, the sea below churning with bodies. In the chaos of the fighting, two of Balon Greyjoy's sons, Rodrik and Meuron, were cut down. Rodrik fell on the great stone bridge between the Bloody Keep and the Great Keep, fighting to his last breath. Meuron died defending the sea tower, his body claimed by the waves. Their death struck the Ironborn like a hammer blow. The line of succession shattered in the spray. By the third day, the sea tower was a ruin. Stannis' bombardment had reduced its upper floors to rubble, its gates hanging twisted on their hinges. The Bloody Keep was surrounded, its defenders starving and exhausted. Eddard Stark's forces pushed across the final bridge under covering fire from the fleet, and the Kraken banners were torn down. Balon Greyjoy, Lord Reaper of Pyke, had no choice. His sons lay dead, his fleet scattered, his walls breached. He bent the knee to Robert Baratheon aboard the king's flagship, swearing fealty once more. But this surrender came with a price beyond gold or ships. As surety of his loyalty, Balon's last surviving son, a boy of 9 named Theon, was taken from the islands to live as ward and hostage to Lord Eddard Stark of Winterfell. For the Ironborn, it was the deepest wound of all. A prince of Pyke carried away to the cold halls of the north, a living reminder that their lord's rebellion had failed. And for Theon, it was the beginning of a life between two worlds, never truly belonging to either. The Greyjoy's rebellion lasted less than a year, but its consequences rippled through the decades that followed. The Ironborn lost not only their fleet, but their confidence. The old way retreated into whispers and memories, while Balon Greyjoy ruled under the crown he had once defied. Yet in his heart, the fire had not gone out. Years later, when the realm fractured in the War of the Five Kings, Balon would raise his banners once more, and this time, the Kraken would strike deeper. But that is another tale. The Siege of Pyke in 289 AC marked the last time the Iron Throne brought its full might against the Iron Islands. It was a war of stone and sea, of pride and punishment, of men who would rather drown than bend. And in the end, it was proof that even the fiercest storm can be broken against the rocks. The rebellion was crushed, but the embers of Ironborn defiance never died. For in the Iron Islands, the sea always remembers. If you enjoyed this dive into Westeros history, don't forget to like, comment, and share. The realm awaits your voice.